Hello, nerds for Yang.
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Now with this campaign, bang, dang, it's and Drew, come roll with the Yang Gang.
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
All right, Lutchi Gayot in the house from the great state of New York. Welcome to the Nerd Zone, sir.
Thank you for having me today, Tom.
I'm very excited to have this conversation. I've heard a lot about you, but we've not met before. And just for everyone else to know, in about 50 minutes or so, we'll have Herzog hop in, and then we'll have a tri-state area talk. Because I guess I was born in New Jersey, so I feel affinity with you guys.
Oh, okay.
But before we get into that broader conversation, for those who may not have met you before via other interviews, can you just give a little introduction to who is Lutchi Gayot?
Absolutely. So my name is Lutchi Gayot. I am a congressional candidate in the 9th Congressional District in Brooklyn. Funny enough, Jonathan's district is my neighboring district. So he's right next to me. He actually stretches into Manhattan. I'm in Brooklyn, so I start over at Atlantic Avenue, which is right in the central Brooklyn. It goes all the way to the very end. So I'm running on the platform, of course, of a UBI, Universal Basic Income. But in addition to that, I also want to bring the trades back into the schools, but not only in construction skills, but also in robotics and AI. I feel that people in Washington, D.C. are not talking about robotics and AI. I believe they are in China. I believe they are in Europe. We need to start this conversation here in D.C. because that is the future of industry in this country. So I definitely want to go to D.C. and champion for that. If people who live in the tri-state area, but in New York or Brooklyn in particular, would know that rents are super, super high. So what I want to do is, in addition to financing additional affordable housing, I also want to make your rent tax deductible. If you are a homeowner, you could deduct the cost of your mortgage interest off of your taxes, but you don't get the same benefit as a renter. So I believe, especially now, we need to update the tax code to also include renters, especially for the people living in Brooklyn. And so, that's the long and short of my platform. I have a lot more to talk about. I'm sure we'll be able to really dig deep as this hour commences.
Yes, yeah, for sure. Well, take us back to baby Lutchi. Like, where does your story begin, and how did you end up here?
Born and raised in my district, unlike anyone else who's running in this race, except for the incumbent. I would have to say she's also from the community. But born and raised in Flatbush, Brooklyn, New York. I went to St. Rose of Lima School, which is right in my district. And I am currently a licensed New York City contractor. Funny enough, that's not what I studied. When I went to school, I actually went for music, but no one told me that music was not a marketable skill. So when I got out of school, I had music, no job, and college debt. So I decided to fall back on what I learned in high school, which was carpentry. I took wood shop, and believe it or not, I used those skills to start a construction company. 20 years later, here I am. So this is one of the main reasons why I am a champion of bringing the trades back into the schools, because that will give every child access to upward mobility right inside of their high school diploma, plus the UBI platform. If you have combined those two, you'll be able to give Americans an actual floor, something to stand on in order to build some sort of upward mobility or some sort of future for themselves and their families.
So tell me about the carpentry business. Like, when you started, so you studied music, you determined that it was not going to be a way that you could find a living right away as a professional musician. And then you say, hey, I remember wood shop. I was pretty good at that. Did you then work for someone else? Did you do odd jobs for people and kind of grow your thing? How did it go?
It was an actual total. I'll give you the story.
Yeah.
So I was renovating my home. I was doing a renovation, and people were walking by and they were asking, well, who's doing this work in the front? And I was like, oh yeah, I'm just fixing this place up. I'm just working. And by the time I got to like the fifth or sixth person, I was like, you know what? Maybe I could turn this into a business. So I go to the city, I find out what you need in order to be licensed and legally do this. And as I was finishing up the front, I put a sign up. And I put a sign up and I made up a construction company name, my construction company name. I put the sign up, I put the number on it, and I started getting phone calls.
Oh,
My own actual renovation, my own handyman work in front of my home started getting me jobs. So that's how I started it.
that's brilliant, man. That's like that's a little bit of the American dream right there. You put a sign up and then the phone started ringing.
That's
What was the
this
name of
country's
the
all about.
Yeah, what was the name of the construction company?
Landmark.
Landmark. Oh, that sounds serious. That doesn't sound like a one-man show. They probably thought they were calling up this like huge like operation. Little did they know.
Yeah, hey, you got to start somewhere.
So, why do you think you were able to get the business so quickly? Like, I have a theory that a lot of people don't learn those kind of specialized skills, and everybody wants to be like a sports marketer or a social media marketing manager or like, work in Hollywood or whatever. And I think the reality is that, there aren't that many jobs that actually fit that description, and the jobs that we need, the people don't have the skills. What do you think drove your small businesses kind of early traction?
This was almost 20 years ago. So around that time, that was before the first mortgage crash. So people were renovating their homes already. So people were already looking for contractors, and a lot of contractors back then, even now, what they would do is they would give you financing. So if you were to hire a contractor, they would be working with banks who would be financing the job. So a lot of people had access to capital to do the new kitchen, bathroom, or if you want to lay a new floor, things of that nature. If you want to, I don't know, whatever kind of renovation work that would make the place more valuable. At that point in time, a lot of people were spending money on. So it was a little bit of a good timing as well, I would have to say, definitely.
Yeah, and what about so what were the hours like? My guess is that you were probably working many days a week, and it was not always an easy ride. But tell me, what was the story of Landmark?
Well, I'd tell you, as far as hours are concerned, there's really no true hour to start or hour to stop. It's just a matter of getting the job done. But of course, if you have people that you're working with, you'll have a set schedule. But in terms of me, at least at that point, definitely there weren't any hours. Right now I'm project managed. I don't do anything hands-on. I just manage the projects. I make sure that everything is the way it needs to be. But now it's a lot easier because you could more or less delegate. You more or less explain to people what it is that you need done. Sometimes perhaps if it's not even people who are working for you, you're just there on a consulting type of level with the client. So it's more about what it is that the client needs to do in order to get this job executed the quickest way possible. That's also very important. Sourcing materials, that's important. Making sure that you source what's not going to blow your budget. Or sometimes on plans, an architect can give you something that's very extravagant. And if you try to get that made, it may cost a ridiculous amount of money. So sometimes you have to take a step back and use, again, a little bit of creativity to build whatever it is they want you to build, but build it for a lot less than what they have on the plans. So it's quite a bit of work, and you also have to have a lot of experience, especially when it comes to construction. You don't want to make any mistakes. Because even the smallest mistake could be disastrous in this business. So you have to be on top of your game all the time.
No, you know what? I get the sense that you would see things through, which if I ever needed the construction or some renovations in Brooklyn, I might have to give Landmark a call. But
give us a call.
Nell has a question, a very important one. Mets or Yankees?
Mets or Yankees?
Yeah, man.
See, that's one of those type of questions that'll get you in a lot of trouble. Who you're speaking to.
You gotta. So, what is your answer?
Man, All I would have to say, I remember when the Mets won the World Series. If I'm not mistaken, that was 1986. And I remember I just mentioned my school, St. Rose. The only thing I could remember was the day after the World Series when we showed up to school. Everyone in the front, I must be like 6 or 7 years old. They were like shouting, "Let's go Mets! Let's go Mets!" And Darryl Strawberry, for whatever reason, I always looked up to him. You know, just watching Darryl, even when he left New York and he went to Dodgers. I think he also went to Montreal. So I followed him for quite some time, you know, and then with the Yankees, I mean, it's the Yankees, man. You know, it's that's like if you go anywhere outside of New York and they're wearing a hat, most likely it's a Yankee, you know.
Yeah.
So so the Yankees are also have a very special place in a lot of New Yorkers' hearts, you know. But I don't know. I would have to say I would lean towards the Mets, you know, just because of that experience when I was a child. But I'm definitely rooting for the Yankees if they ever go to the World Series again.
All right, apparently you got the answer correct. That Nell, who just became a member of the Nerds channel, so thank you, Nell. Welcome to the nation. He's a Mets fan, and I would agree. I kind of feel like the Yang Gang is a community of underdogs. And when I hear underdog, I don't think of like the Yankees. You know, they're kind of like the Patriots. It's like, ugh. Enough of the winning. Stop. But at any rate, let's go on to the you raised the point about mortgage interest deduction and rent. I was curious about that because I'm kind of a part libertarian, and part of me feels like, well, why do we have all of these tax breaks for people to buy houses when sometimes it encourages people to buy maybe more house than they can afford, and it kind of potentially inflates the cost of real estate. Like now, I currently live in Switzerland, where home ownership is actually a very small percentage of the population. Most people rent, and it's fine. They have a great life, and they don't end up having these massive mortgages. And it kind of keeps prices down. Like even here, they make it very unattractive for you to flip property very quickly. Like you have to hold it for many, many years kind of thing. And I'm just kind of curious for your thoughts on how much the federal government should be involved in kind of the real estate market in general. Like, because clearly that mortgage interest thing does have an impact. People will argue positive or negative, but what's your take?
My take on the government in relation to the real estate market, that is another fine line, because when you go to different places, for instance, where you are, people look at things in the sense of a greater good. You know, you can't flip a home in Switzerland right away, because that's going to create a market where prices will get inflated and people will get pushed out. So the government probably sat down and planned it, you know, planned to say, hey, look, you know, we have X amount of citizens, we have X amount of or X size of a housing market. So therefore our housing market or economy can only afford this type of economic activity. And so therefore they wrote all the rules out in order to accommodate. Now here in the US, it's all regional. For instance, you'll be in New York, where there's a lot more people than there are units for people to live in, but there are a lot more people that there are units in affordable places to live. And the argument here is that landlords, due to the fact that there is a huge demand here, will keep raising the rent because they'll follow basically the basic principles of economics, which makes sense, right? If you got a supply versus a demand, if the demand is higher than supply, then the price goes up. So therefore, rents go way too high in New York. Now, again, it's a fine line, because you kind of have to have a control over what landlords do to tenants, because landlords are not always fair to tenants in New York as well. For instance, you have people who have lived in buildings for 30 plus years who are being pushed out right now because there's a new demographic moving into that neighborhood. So that new demographic is coming in with new money, or more money rather, for that particular apartment unit. So that landlord will find a way to push that person out. So for these particular type of situations, this is why you need a government intervention, because this is a unique situation. Now, let's say we go outside of New York, we go upstate New York. You may not necessarily need that because you don't have that greed inside of the real estate market like it exists in the major cities. And I could put my libertarian hat on, and look at it from your perspective as well, and say, well, at the same time, it's a private. People own their land, and they could rent their land for as much as they want to rent their land for. And if you don't like the price, then you could just simply move out. I get that too, but the issue with that is, again, it's one of these unique type of situations to where it would look good if I wrote it down on paper, but if I tried to actually execute it in real life, multiplied by the amount of people who actually live in New York who wouldn't be able to afford their rents otherwise, it becomes more of a conundrum or an enigma or whatever you want to call it. So I completely get where you're coming from in terms of why should the government dictate what people do with their properties. I get it, but again, at the same time, we have to protect people's rights to live in a place in New York. So that's where I really stand with that question.
Yeah, I appreciate the nuanced answer, and at least the openness to more of a hands-off perspective when it comes to the economy.
I totally get it. I 100% get it. So yeah.
I was just I did a video last night looking at the CARES and the HEROES Act, and it was amazing, all of these like line items for everybody's sort of favorite pet project. And they all, I'm sure, like came from with the right motives, but you just wonder, like, well, they kind of rushed this bill, like they're gonna just throw 100 million here, 100 million there. It adds up, it's like shopping, and you wonder if they put the money in the right places. Do you have a view on these stimulus plans? Like how much do you think should be going just directly in cash relief versus more targeted efforts?
I'll start with the targeted efforts. In terms of the targeted efforts, like my approach to government, or my approach to just economics, budgeting, is I always try to get the most out of every single move. For instance, in the first round of stimulus that went out, over $1 trillion, we'll say, went to Wall Street. And if it's Wall Street, that means $1 trillion went to the banks. Now, within that trillion, I would have made a deal with the banks. I would have been like, you're holding X amount of student loans. Mm-hmm. How about I will loan you this $1 trillion with whatever interest, let's say 0 interest, whatever the interest rate would be, right? But within that $1 trillion, I'm also purchasing all your student loans at 10 to 25 cents on the dollar. Mm-hmm. Then I will, inside that same legislation, I will allow you to write off the difference, that 75% or the 90 to 75% over the next 10 years. So what I just did net effectively, the government just paid off all student loans in that one deal, because the banks will agree. They'll be like, okay, yeah, we'll take a 25% return on all these bad loans we have out there. They'll take that, distribute it to all their investors, and then they'll collect on that loss net effectively, discounting it off of their tax liability for the next 10 years. Student loans paid. See mm-hmm. that? Banks are okay, student loans paid. No more money spent. That is what the government lacks. This is, and here's the thing: everybody's a winner. The banks are winners, the students are winners, and Congress is a winner. Everybody wins, but they don't think that deep. They just think, well, I've got these banks, I've got these investors, they need money. Let's throw in a few things that make it look nice. Okay, we put some money for homelessness, put a couple of dollars for this other thing that feels good. Put it out there. Banks get their money, crumbs go to the people, and people still have student loans. So that would be my approach going into Washington, D.C. Every time we sit down, I'll sit down with everybody, conservatives, libertarians, I'll sit with Rand and just sit down and really figure out how we all can get together and make things happen.
Yeah, I like that sort of like triple bottom line approach, like everybody wins. What would you do in the CARE Act? I think it put about 50 billion into the airline industry. Do you think that there was anything we could have done there to also not just help out the United and Airlines and Continental and Delta shareholders, but more where the citizens also benefited? Or how do you feel about the CARES Act aviation money?
Yeah, the aviation money, I get it. The aviation industry is a very expensive industry to run. Years and years and years ago, I actually used to fly Cessnas,
Mm.
SR-172s. I haven't been in one in 15 years almost, but yes, I do feel that the aviation industry is an expensive industry. So even having planes sitting there, you've got to pay a fee for where it sits. You've got to pay the interest or whatever fees you're paying for leasing the planes. You got to pay your insurances. So you have a lot of overhead. So if planes aren't flying, they're not making money. So I get why the money went there, but here's the difference. If I were to give the airline industry $50 billion, that's 50 billion with a B, I would have worked out a 15 to 20-year plan. And as you know, I'm sure you've heard of Elon Musk with his white paper, the Hyperloop. Then you've heard about that, the Virgin Hyperloop? Okay,
yes.
So the Hyperloop, I feel, or maybe not just the Hyperloop, but something similar, I feel is the future of transportation in this country. I think the airline industry, we need to start having them open up their minds to not think, well, we're just we just transport people through air, but versus we just transport people. So we need to have the airline industry to also start investing in the in high speed transport rather than just having them be airlines. So if I were going to give them that $50 billion, it would be attached to them having a plan, or let's call it a 10-year plan, on how they're going to integrate into the high-speed transport market that's going to be developing in this country. Be it investing. You've got you've got Virgin, who's investing a lot of money in it, but behind that Virgin brand are probably hundreds of investors. Some of those investors should be airlines as well, now, so that the airline industry doesn't send people to Washington, D.C. to start to contest against high-speed rail because they don't want to lose customers. So me looking ahead, I kind of want to tie the airline industry into more green, high-speed transport that can also be profitable for their investors. That's one part of the fix, and the second part of the fix is getting the airline industry going again in the meantime.
Let me play devil's advocate with you.
Sure.
What about just giving those airlines nothing and saying,
that.
You know what, that 50 billion, I'm just, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to give 50 million people $1,000 check each.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And sorry, United Airlines CEO, shit happens. This is capitalism.
Yes. But the airline, I mean, if it was in a scenario where the airlines do not have to pay the money back, then that's a whole different game. But if that money goes to the airlines, I'm giving that money to airlines with the understanding that they will be paying the money back. Even if we give them the money for free, practically for free, let's say at 1%, fine, we won't collect. We'll be paying the interest on the money. The government will be paying the interest on the money. Fine, we'll pay that, but we're not going to pay the 50 billion back. So that's a big difference. So we're not letting them, at least from what I understand, we're not letting them have $50 billion. We're loaning it to them so they could float until they could operate more to pay the money back. So of course I want to give every American over the age of 18 $1,000 a month, not just 50 billion worth. But as you know, to be able to pull something like that off in Washington, D.C., you're going to have to really sit down with everyone to make it happen. And I believe I can. But just in terms of what your question was with the airline industry, I believe, if they're going to pay the money back and they have a history of paying the money back, then I don't see the harm in loaning them the money, because you have union workers who work for the airlines. I'm a union guy, local 253 Carpenters Union, so I have to think about that too when I come up with this legislation to say, well, the airlines get no money. I have to think about my union brothers and sisters as well. So that's more or less how I would approach it. It's a $50 billion loan.
Yeah, no, I got you. Laura Lane has a stimulus question. She wants to know, would you ever vote for a federal package in Congress that doesn't provide aid to the states? Maybe, I guess, skips the states and just goes directly to the citizens, or maybe targeted industry help. There's a big debate about, well, some of these states were not managing their budgets before COVID, so it's not up to the federal government to reward kind of fiscal irresponsibility.
Yes, you're right. I mean, the crisis has also created, and I hate to say it this way, a window of opportunity for states to bring money into their budgets. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. Some states do need money. I wouldn't say don't give the states any money at all, because then everyone in Congress will get voted out. Including me. We got to fund our schools, don't we? But in Niger. But what I would do is I would take a more measured approach.
Yeah. So when you try and think about, well, you were kind of holding the banks and airlines' feet to the fire a little bit, saying, hey, you want this money, there's going to have to be, well, I hate to use the term, but a little bit of a quid pro quo, that this doesn't come for free, right?
It doesn't come for free.
Right. So when a state gets bailed out, is that a loan as well? What do they need to do in exchange? Or is it just like, hey, this will make you whole, don't worry about it?
Yes, I don't think that ever works between states and the federal government, unless it's tax money that they're sending back. A loan's a loan. There are some states that need money. Some states are finding ways to bring the money in, ways to bring the money in so they do not have to pay it back. They're bringing the money in through their health care. They're bringing the money in through food assistance. They're bringing the money in through homeless assistance programs. So there's a lot of programs that the New York City government would normally pay for, but they get this funny federal money to cover it. So net effectively, they're kind of getting the money back, or they're getting the money from the government. So, I mean, the states need the money. The cities need the money. You just have to attach certain requirements to that legislation to make sure that money is spent properly. That would be my approach to that particular issue.
Lutchi, let's talk a little bit about your decision to run. It sounds like you had a pretty good, and you still do. You still have your contractor business, right? And now you're project managing, which tells me you have people do a lot of the more intense kind of manual work, and you're working with clients. You're running the budget, the schedule, super high value added stuff, and that sounds like the business is obviously pre-COVID was on solid footing. Why give that up and go to that mess of a town called Washington, D.C.?
Well, it starts 15 years ago. 15 years ago, I went to a community board meeting where the incumbent was there. Actually, the incumbent wasn't even in Congress as yet. She was actually in city council, along with a state senator that was there as well. The whole purpose of that meeting was a shelter they were building a few blocks away. And the residents in the neighborhood, we wanted it to be low income or affordable housing. Now, mind you, this is 2005. It's quite a little bit ago. Mm. So we wanted it to be low income or affordable housing. So we were in there trying to make the case. Well, they were on the stage and we're saying, well, there's nothing we can do about it. It's the developer's land. They could do as they wish. And what I was saying was, because I just kind of started in the construction world, but I kind of knew my stuff a little bit. So I understood that the money that was going to go into that shelter was going to be coming from the government. So if our tax dollars are paying for these people to be housed in shelters, we should have at least a say to how those tax dollars are spent. Mm-hmm. Now, fast forward today. If you look at how much money the city of New York spends per year per homeless person in shelters, it comes out to $20,000 per person. Damn. Now multiply that going back 15 years. That's enough money to have built several city blocks worth of affordable and low income housing. This is the reason why I'm running, because the people who are in control of the bag or of the bank or of the money are not using it in such a way to where it benefits the people. If you want to build shelter to benefit the people, you don't build one single shelter that's going to cost you the cost of 20 shelters over the course of 15 years. You want to build shelters that and continue to build more, I'm sorry, not shelters, but affordable housing, permanent housing that people could live in for several years to come. So that was the argument I was trying to make. I still don't think they get it, you know, but I'm definitely gonna push really hard to win this election and bring some of these good ideas to Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those things. It's similar to how much we spend on incarceration, healthcare. Like when you add up the cost of sort of curing things, oftentimes it's like 100 times more than prevention, or kind of solving the root cause. Why do you think we're so eager to build homeless shelters and prisons and sort of emergency rooms, but so reluctant to think about affordable housing, better public education, and better like primary care for kids, and better healthy kind of like awareness? Why do you think it's like? Because when you run the numbers, it's very clear that you will save money by making sure people are healthy, well educated, and housed in a sustainable way, and not wait for it to get out of control. But yet we don't do that. We don't get in front of it.
Yes, we do not do that, and it's not that, because I'm pretty sure there are many other people that are currently in government that are a lot smarter than I am. And I'm pretty sure they see what I see, and I'm pretty sure some of the people that sign on to these type of deals, like the shelter I mentioned earlier, do see what you and I see. I think the problem is bigger than that. I'll go back to my scenario earlier, where, for instance, the city of New York spent $1 billion last year housing the homeless, which comes out to about $20,000 per homeless person. And the people are still homeless because that money goes to for-profit shelters, for-profit hotels, and for-profit entities that benefit off of poverty. And I like to call, the term that I like to use is called the poverty industrial complex, which a lot of people don't think about it, because on the left, we like to really focus on the military industrial complex. But believe it or not, Tom, the poverty industrial complex is twice the size as the military industrial complex. And you've got corporations that are traded on the stock market that get money to provide certain services to the impoverished, including shelters, including foster care, including certain things that you think the government is doing, but it's really a private entity that is contracted by the government to do it. So the city should be in the business of stopping homelessness. That should be the point. The point should not be being in the business of having shelters, because that means you're there for a little bit of time, then you're back outside trying to figure out how you're going to give yourself upward mobility. So I think this really has to do with leadership. It has to do with the people that we vote into office, really understanding how these processes work, so that you actually vote in the right person, not the person who comes out very eloquently and says something so eloquent that you think, oh man, I'm going to vote for that person, but the person didn't say anything. You need people with facts, with numbers, with good ideas. But that's really where I think it lies. I think it's the poverty industrial complex. It exists in all major cities. No matter where you go, you're going to see it in one way or the other. And it's unfortunate, because these entities should really be in business to make people's lives better, rather than just keeping a status quo to make themselves richer.
Yeah, I haven't heard about the poverty industrial complex, but I see where you're going. And let me ask you this. Let's say you get to Congress and you're like, hey, we have to stop having these weird incentives for private entities to earn money based on how many people are poor. Okay, and I mean, I buy that argument, but then you get there, and it seems like, I'm sure Nancy Pelosi Pelosi and the senior Democrats that are there are going to be like, look, Lutchi, you're a great guy. You're a freshman. Like you gotta wait your turn. Like, we're going to put you on the such and such committee, which has nothing to do with what you care about, and nobody wants it. But you're a rookie. Like, how do you actually get change in a couple of years, or what's your plan to make a dent there? Like, if you got to DC, how do you avoid being one of those Congress people that just go with these great ideas and then like the system just swallows them up and then like spits them out a few years later?
That is true. That is true. Now here's the thing that I don't think congressional people do or use. You have the power of a single vote. That means you're a proxy for 700,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
That's 700,000 people that's behind you. That's a lot of value. And what you should really be doing is you should be shopping out your district. You should be going around finding companies that want to bring more jobs, certain entities that want to come and invest. So if you can't get anything done inside of Congress, you could use the power of your office to bring more investment into your district. So at least when you go back to your people, you say, well, the people in Congress or the speaker didn't want to listen to me, but so far here's what I've managed to accomplish. So you got to think outside the box. You can't just say, well, I go to Washington, D.C., no one wants to listen to me. You show up back home and say, well, and you give them a song and a dance. You got to be working, brother. If you can't get anything through Congress, you need to start bringing more resources into your community. And that's and I believe that's very easy to do because companies are begging just to hand you money as a representative, just want to give you money. So if Amazon, for instance, comes up to me and say, hey, Lutchi, we want to give you money, I'll be like, well, instead of giving me money, how about you start STEM programs in all our high schools? That's worth about a cool couple million, couple, actually more than that, but you get my point. A bank comes along and they want, I don't know, to give me money. I say, well, I don't need your money. Instead, put some more money into homelessness. So there are ways you can get things done if you know how to use all your resources.
You mentioned Amazon, which was in the news, I guess, a year or two ago a lot because there, as you probably remember, was discussion of like their second headquarters potentially being partly in New York. And it was interesting. My recollection is a lot of cities were and towns were falling all over themselves, begging for Amazon to come to their area. And I sense, at least from what I read, that the New Yorkers were not super like inviting. And I'm curious, like, do you think that was the right call? Like, I guess the argument is like the New Yorkers held their ground. They didn't want an unfair deal, but I mean, it would have been meaningful number of jobs, right?
It would have been a meaningful number of jobs. A lot of people tend to blame AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, because they want to say that she was spearheading the movement of getting Amazon out, along with other people. We have a little bit of time, so I'll go over what my view is. What I feel is, I get it. I get what AOC was trying to do. I get what a lot of people were trying to do, but I don't think it was done the right way. I think this should have occurred at a table somewhere, and it should have been negotiated. In addition to that, what should have been done, like I said earlier, if Amazon's going to get billions of dollars in tax breaks, let's get STEM programs in our schools as an exchange. So now if I'm a representative, I'm like, okay, we're giving Amazon X billions of dollars and whatever tax breaks because they're going to build this complex. But in exchange for that, we're getting $1 billion worth of STEM programs for all our high schools. So within the next 5 years, we're going to have an entire generation of children graduating high school proficient in robotics and AI. That's an easy sell, Tom. But if you're going to just show up and give them $1 billion worth of breaks, the people are going to get upset. So again, I put on my libertarian hat. I get it, 25,000 jobs. You look at the economic impact in that, plus the construction jobs. And again, the locals were going to do the work. So perhaps I would have gotten some work out of that. Most likely I would have gotten some work as well, working with the unions. So I get it. I get both sides of the argument. I just think on the other side, it should have been a lot calmer. It shouldn't have been where they made it into a media circus, because then it started to tarnish the brand Amazon, and that's why they backed out. If this negotiation was occurring, I don't want to say but behind closed doors and sound like it's shady, but when you're negotiating a deal, before you bring the whole deal out to the people, you have to have all the fundamentals in place. So to work out the fundamentals of this deal, it should have been done, and then when they're prepared and ready with a good deal, you take it to the people. What they did was Amazon said, hey, we want X billions of dollars worth of tax breaks. They gave it to them, and the people got mad. So I don't even blame AOC. She was just reacting to what the people were doing. I blame the people who put the deal together.
All right, let's do this. You seem like a really convincing advocate and a good negotiator. So let's do a little role play, little nerds role play right now.
Oh, here we go.
So let's say you're in Congress. You're in Congress, okay. And let's say I'm an executive at Amazon in Seattle, okay. And we're on a call, private call. We're not doing this out in the public. And I say, bro, we have a deal. We already have negotiated this for months and months and months. You give us the tax breaks. We're going to bring thousands and thousands and thousands of jobs. End of story. Why is it now that your colleagues are going out in front of the cameras renegotiating? Like, this is not in good faith. Like, we tried hard. I have a list of cities begging me to go and put jobs there. And honestly, it's really hard to work with New York.
I'm born and raised in this city, and I know exactly what you mean. I'm going to stick with you in this conversation. No matter what happens, you're staying in New York, because I'm going to make sure that you're happy. Let me ask you, how much do you spend on marketing per year in the city of New York? How much is your marketing budget for the city of New York?
Probably tens and tens of millions, if not more. Maybe 100 million.
Tens and tens of millions, if not more.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say, okay, so let's do this. You give us $1 billion worth of STEM programs in our schools, and we'll brand it the Amazon STEM program. So no matter who looks at that program, they're going to see your name. That's $1 billion worth of advertising right there forever, or for as long as we have our relationship. So you're going to get that. In addition to, you're going to get X amount of, whatever it is that's in the deal. So that's how I would start it. I would look at it I would look at every little thing I could turn into value. If I could turn the Amazon logo into $1 billion worth of value, I'm going to do it. So I'm going to turn that logo into $1 billion worth of value to make sure Amazon doesn't go anywhere. So, this is off the cuff. You just threw something.
Yeah. No, okay.
Okay. Down and thought about this.
I love it, Lutchi. This is good. You're good on your feet. So now we're going to flip. We're going to switch. So now you're still Lutchi, but now you've got a neighboring congressional representative. And he or she says, whoa, what are you doing? I heard that you were talking to those evil corporate blood-sucking Amazon executives, mm-hmm. And you basically sold our public health system, a public schooling system, to the man. F that. Like, we're not McDonald's. They're not going to put the logos all over the damn place. They're screwing us. We need to stick it to them.
If I hear something like that coming out of someone, they're like literally upset that we now have STEM programs in our schools. Well, I'll just open up the conversation and say, well, what do you think the schools need?
And then they might say, what we need is the ability to design our own STEM program. We'll take their money, but mm-hmm. we don't brand it. We don't give we're not going to have like NASCAR advertisements over every locker. This mm-hmm. This is a sacred institution, a public school, and the private sector should get their nasty, greedy hands off of it.
I hear you, but this is not a new idea. There are other schools who are sponsored by companies, and they more gladly put their names on it. I'll do the research and I'll give them a list of schools, but I know this exists. This is not a new idea. You've got McDonald's who funds programs in schools. You've got local businesses that give money to school teams. I'm just making it on a larger scale. I'm putting it across the city. I'm making it instead of a couple $1,000 situation, I'm making a $1 billion situation. So let me know what do you think the schools need? I'll throw it in the deal, and then I'll make it your idea too. If it's a real politician.
All right. So now, last.
I'll take that.
Oh yeah, dude, this is great.
That's my next election. I'm in.
All right, I got one more character from DC pops up, and this is like a pretty senior Democratic Party, let's say, legislative leader, and this person says, "Hey, look, this whole Amazon versus New York thing, this is not becoming a win for the party.
Mm-hmm.
That we can't be seen working with them now that there's so much anger about the tax breaks. Hey, look, between you and me, yeah, it probably was an okay deal, but it's kind of a stinker now, and we need to distance ourselves. The optics are just too bad. Whatever thing you come up with, even the STEM stuff, we just can't be seen working with Amazon. We're trying to present ourselves as a advocate for the little people. We're trying to box Trump in as a corporatist. So, like, you just need to back off. I don't care what deal you have with that Amazon guy. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, it's a stinker. You need to be a team player.
Absolutely. And I'd be like, I'm definitely a team player. And I've done my own research, and it turns out that the bark is not louder than the dog. Most people want these jobs in New York City. We lose this, the entire city's going to come down on you. Just like what actually happened. We lost the deal. The whole city came down on everybody, especially the unions. Do you know how much money got lost? You've got people who went out and purchased land, who started businesses, who already inked contracts. You've got, like, there is so much money vaporized in this deal. I find it very hard to believe that a New York City politician would give me a call and tell me to kill the deal after I got Amazon to give us $1 billion.
Yeah. No, Lutchi, I buy it, man. I like you. Let's go look at your website together so that people who want to learn more about you can go to the right place. So let me share your site here, which is loading. Control O. There we go. Let's go to the home. So this is teamgayot.com. The T is silent. What is the French origin of the Gayot story?
The French origin of the Gayot story is the Gayot family were a family of merchants. They were merchants, and shippers. So in the portion of Haiti where my grandfather is from, he actually worked in the shipping company. He was in customs. So he was like one of the customs officers who received and sent ships out. So my father's side of the family, they're all really knowledgeable in the seas, and ships and shipping and, just that type of industry. So that's really where the Gayot name came from.
Love it. It's always nice to hear the little backstory. You know what I mean? So teamgayot.com. And when's the big day for you? When's it all gonna happen?
Big day, June 23rd, but voting starts the 13th, and you could actually order your ballot now if you go to actually go to Google and look up I'll come up with it before the end of the show. So I didn't know where to get to download where to apply to receive the ballot.
For the New York primary?
Yeah, for the New York primary, correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Let's see if I can find it. Let's see if...
Oh, yeah, maybe. You know where I have it? Google this real quick.
Here?
Go to Medium.
Yeah?
Medium. Because there's going to be a link right there to it.
Medium?
It's hard to find through the Board of Elections because so many different links, but go to Medium.
Okay.
Medium.com.
Uh-huh.
Okay,
yes.
Look up.
Just...
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, look up Lutchi Gayot. Because I have the actual link in a story.
Where do I look up on Medium? I'm not familiar with the Medium search. Maybe I'll just Google Medium.
Lutchi Gayot, yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Medium Lutchi Gayot.
Yeah, it'll be the first link. There it is.
Oh, there you go. It works.
And then go to voter suppression and why we run. So that's it right there, right?
Click on this guy.
Yeah, that one. Go into that story.
All right, stand by, loading.
All right, now down towards the bottom is a link. You'll see it there when it pops up. Towards go up a little bit. Not those links, but up. Okay, right there. Nope, down.
I think there's a delay. There's a delay. Hold on.
Okay.
Let me see what you're seeing. All right. Do you want me to go up or down?
Down.
Down. Okay. Hold on. Down.
Okay. Stop right there. The last.
This guy.
That guy.
All right. Let's see. Let's click on that. Jeez. Wow.
I should know this off the top of my head.
Well, you know, it's not easy to find it. I just put that in the chat room for everybody.
Okay, great.
And then I'll also put it on the banner for folks who are watching this on replay.
Yeah, so all New Yorkers, if you're in the state of New York, or if you happen to be in the 9th Congressional District, my district, you can order the ballot through that link. Once you receive it, and what I like about this, you actually receive the ballot. You could sit with the ballot. You could do the research on everyone who's on the ballot, and you make your choice and mail it back in. You know, this is a first for New York. So I'm interested to see how it goes.
Yeah, no, I love it. One thing that I want to check on is how many people out there have liked this conversation, because that will help more people discover your voice.
Thank you.
And let's see, we have right now 17 likes.
Nice.
On YouTube. I tell you what, if we get to 50 likes, I'll donate $50. But we only have 9 more minutes. So if you guys are watching this and you're on watching it through YouTube, like the stream on YouTube, and we'll keep an eye out. And right now it looks like we've got the 17. See if we can get to 50, and no matter what, now we're at 18. So no matter what, I'll just donate however the dollar amount for how many likes there are before we wrap up this stream, up to 50. Just because, or my wife will kill me. But yeah, we'll see how we can get some more money your way. I mean,
I appreciate that.
Yeah, Lutchi, what are you gonna? I see there's a donate button on teamgayot.com. And yes. What would you do with the money in this kind of COVID congressional race? Like, how does that even work? Where do you deploy that capital?
To get in touch with voters, you know. So you've got right now the only way you could really get in touch with voters is through some kind of electronic means. Obviously, no one's going around knocking on doors. It's just not a safe. This is not a safe way to campaign. So every penny is going to go towards either some sort of social media contact, or phone calls, or whatever. It's going to be directed towards contacting voters.
Love it. And how has that been going so far? Do you feel like you have figured out a good, efficient way to contact voters? Is there any way to know that it's working, or is it one of those things where you do everything you can and then you hope on that big day the numbers pan out?
I mean, in any election, I guess it's a little bit of both. more on the data end, but there's a little bit of both. You got to go out there, you got to reach as many people as you can, and then at the end you got to hope for the best. Anything that happened this year, there are 5 people in the race, and so I'm pretty confident that I'm gonna come out with a really good number. It's just a matter of also Yang Gang. How much Yang Gang do we have in the 9th Congressional District of Brooklyn? How much Yang Gang do we have that know that there's a pro-UBI candidate running? And in terms of just the UBI movement itself, I feel needs to propel its candidates. Not even with money as much as with retweets, as much as with, for instance, any really big influencers could come out and say, hey, you know what, this guy Lutchi Gayot, he's in the 9th Congressional District, I've spoken to him, support him. I mean, the big influencers, the ones that have the 15s, the 20s, the 100,000 followers on Twitter and Facebook, we need the entire UBI family to push these candidates, because I guarantee you there's enough Yang Gang in the 9th congressional to win this race, because after Bernie Sanders, Andrew Yang was the second highest fundraiser in my district. So Bernie was the first, Yang was the second. So there are a lot of people in my district that gave money to Yang, you know. So again, it's a matter of whether or not the entire movement is going to push its candidates, and I think that itself is going to at least get us half the way there, and then the rest is just going to have to be real hard grassroots grinding.
Yeah. And what is grassroots grinding in a coronavirus lockdown environment? Like, how do you even, are you like on the phone, I'm guessing, calling people, texting people? Like, you're obviously not knocking on doors and standing on corners.
Yes. I mean, normally grassroots grinding would be knocking on doors. Now it's what you just said, you know, just through electronic means, try to reach as many voters as you can, try to do as many of these kind of interviews as you can, you know, reach out to as many local media outlets and the ones that would give you a write-up, and, you know, work with them, see if they'll put you out there. That's really the long and short of it. Typically, money would be a good driver in elections. This particular year, it's not, because you don't need a campaign office. You don't need a huge campaign staff. You can't have people out on the street. You can't have people knocking on doors. So all that money that would have been necessary for that, you don't need. So the only money that you do need is the money to do what we've been speaking about, which is reaching out to people electronically.
Yeah. No, I think it's just a crazy world we're in now, and I'm glad that it's cool that you're on Medium and you're on these live streams and you're on Twitter. You're kind of this whole cohort of candidates. You guys are like writing the book as you're doing it. Like it's kind of a brave new world. Let's do a little check-in on the Nerds for Humanity likes challenge. Let's see here. We are at 27 likes. So I think, now we're at 28.
Oh,
so,
wow.
You know, we've been live for 57 minutes and 15 seconds. So at 60 minutes, in the next 3 minutes, I'll do a check. And then just to keep me honest, I will fill out this guy. And right now, it looks like this number is going to be 28. But we'll just do a check in a couple minutes to see how many likes we got. This is the first time I've done this, Lutchi, but I thought it would be fun just to engage with the audience. And frankly, I was planning on donating to you anyway, but we'll just make it a little more fun. So before we start to wrap up, because I know we got Herzog, that we'll have a little joint conversation with the three of us for a few minutes. But while we still have one-on-one time, what are some things that you wanted to talk about that maybe we haven't gotten a chance to hit on before we move on to the next part of this stream?
One thing I just wanted to brush over, actually I spoke about it a little bit before, was my affordable housing plan.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, especially you, again, I'll put my libertarian hat on. You as a libertarian or other libertarians may try to say, or may want to say, well, the government should be in the business of building people's houses. Well, again, when you want, if you want to get these type of proposals through Congress, you have to come up with very creative ways to get it done. So another creative way to get housing built is by way of the federal housing bonds. And, you know, I'm a World War II buff. So World War II, half of it was paid for by the federal war bonds. So I want to come up with the federal housing bonds. Now, that's easy to get through Congress. Conservatives and liberals will all agree. Now, here's the part that enhances it. I want to put it on a blockchain, you know, have it on a blockchain. So if you're familiar with crypto, crypto, especially if it's something that's a good idea, crypto explodes and it sells tons of it. Can you imagine if you come out with a federal housing bond backed by homes built with that money on a blockchain? You're going to raise $1 trillion overnight. I'll go to Goldman Sachs and get the trillion. I get $1 trillion a year. Okay, Goldman Sachs will put that thing all over the planet. So you see that? and the government is
I love your creativity, man. I love it. I
and
love
the
it.
thing is,
Yeah.
it's not a new idea. It's already being done in Europe.
Yeah.
This is not
No,
a new idea.
You strike me. I'm so glad we had this conversation because you've got this entrepreneurial business owner kind of problem solver thing, which is I think what a lot of people liked about Andrew as well. So that's awesome, and I love combining affordable housing, World War II kind of bond fundraising with the blockchain, and then throw in Goldman Sachs. Like, dude, I like it. That's quite a recipe there. I see that your neighbor, Mr. Herzog, is in the house. So Jonathan,
Hello.
give us.
Jonathan's in the building, baby.
He is in the building. Give us 1 second, Jonathan. We had a little fundraising challenge for our man Lutchi. So let me see how many likes we're up to, and we're gonna call it. It's 33. Okay.
Nice.
So I promised I was gonna give $1 for every like. So let's follow through. And so it's not 28 anymore. We're gonna change this number here. 33. Click donate. I'm not leaving no tip. Sorry.
Sorry, Glue.
No, I can't make it monthly because I interview too many people, and then my wife will totally kick my ass. Okay, so that's done, and I'll even share it on Twitter. Sweet.
Thank you so much, Tom.
Hey, no problem, my brother. So let's talk a little bit about Herzog. We'll have a little 3-party chat for 5-10 minutes, and then we'll do a one-on-one with you, and then call it a day. So what are you guys? I read in the news that there was a lot of brouhaha over the voting thing, like whether there would even be a primary. And one op-ed I read was like, hey, Andrew Yang's just being selfish and a little bit of a narcissist. Like, he's not in it anymore. Why does he keep asking for this? And he's endangering people's lives. What are your guys' take on, for those of us who aren't in the New York scene, we only see like the headlines here and there, but like maybe Jonathan, you could start with what your view was on why this lawsuit happened and what it was all about, why you guys took the position you did, and then Lutchi, it'd be great to get your perspective.
Wonderful.
Absolutely. Well, so first off, the headlines that you've been seeing have actually said, "Are you willing to die for Andrew Yang?" So that's actually been their PR, press, judiciary, executive strategy, which is complete and utter gaslighting. But to the actual point, don't take my word for it. Don't take Lucci's word for it. Don't take Andrew Yang's word for it. Take Joe Biden's word for it, which is 1 week before that fateful Board of Elections decision in the middle of the night. Our presumptive nominee, Joe Biden, warned. He said, "We must be extraordinarily wary that President Trump will use COVID as false pretense, as an excuse to try to postpone the November general election." Now, we had Michael Sandel, America's greatest moral philosopher, on Digital Dialectics about a week or two ago, and he warned without any context about this suit. He said the most dangerous precedent we can possibly set, the thing we have to be most wary of in this time of crisis, is that Donald Trump will try to use COVID as false pretense, as excuse to postpone or cancel the November general election. Now, the Board of Elections, the New York State Democratic Party, the New York governor, and now the New York Attorney General, every single member of the New York Democratic elite establishment has officially signed on to canceling the New York presidential primary. They lost big time in federal court last Monday in the Southern District of New York because Judge Torres said, "Your argument is bullshit. You claim COVID? COVID is the reason people shouldn't be able to vote? Well, here's the reality. Governor Cuomo filed an executive order weeks prior, making voting safe by mail for everyone. No excuse, everyone gets an absentee ballot mailed to anywhere your preferred address, postage paid. Everyone can vote safely from home. If you go to vote.nyc or nycabsentee.com/absentee, it takes 1 minute. You can fill the form out and get your mail-in ballot anywhere. So the New York State Democratic Party, and now the Attorney General, who just appealed it yesterday in the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, and the governor and the Board of Elections Commissioners and the New York State Democratic Party leadership decided that what they would spend their resources on, our resources on, is appealing this bogus decision they lost in federal court in the Court of Appeals. Now, if and when they lose again, they may try to appeal to the Supreme Court. But this is the level of corruption we're dealing with that sometimes it reads as incompetence. Because again, and you can literally tune into the recordings, listen to it on YouTube of the oral argument from the court yesterday, where the judge asks the attorney for the state, for the attorney general, hey, one question, has any other state canceled their primary? No. Interesting. Hey, one other question. Will people be voting anyway for their congressional and state primary elections on June 23rd? Yes. Oh, interesting. Hey, one other question. Has voting already been made safe by mail as a result of COVID after the election was postponed? Yes. Oh, interesting. So that's the fact pattern. There's a lot more nuance and intricacies, and happy to dive into it all because New York City, within the state, within the United States, have been the worst offenders of mismanagement and negligence of COVID. More Americans have died from COVID than died in the Vietnam War. The COVID, according to the CDC, will lead to a 9/11 death toll every single day. More than 20,000 New Yorkers have died. We have the highest case infection rate, fatality rate in the States and in the world. The New York City Health Commissioner, as late as mid-March, said, masks don't work, don't wear masks, ride the subway, ride the bus, don't be racist, go out in the streets, all is well. This is the reality we're living with. And this is pandemic politics in action.
Let me play devil's advocate with you for a second, Jonathan, and then we'll get Lutchi in there. I could argue, you know what? You're right, Jonathan. Like, New York has been the hardest hit, and it has the highest infection rates. And some people won't have a computer to go to newyorkabsentee.com/absentee. And they might be older, and they may go to a polling place and vote in a primary, where the presidential candidate has already been chosen, and they're going to put themselves at risk. Why take the risk? Why not just postpone it or put it off a few months or wait?
They're already voting in congressional and state primaries. And if there are any cases where people cannot, for any reason, be able to vote by mail, then the state should spend every single marginal resource in ensuring they can safely vote in person. Do you know how much this costs? All the attorney dollars and billable hours they're spending just to litigate this in court. I mean, it's obscene. So certainly, these are our resources, and they should be allocated towards making voting safe for everyone, everywhere. But the reality is people are already voting for contested congressional elections like mine and state assembly and state house elections across the state and in New York City. And just to really, again, just show how pernicious this is, the former CDC director in a New York Times article said, if New York City had shut down just 10 days sooner, 50 to 80% of all COVID-related deaths could have been avoided. So we're talking about a level of negligence and a level of mismanagement to really a criminal degree, frankly. And then that's then in turn used as gaslighting, a complete inversion of the truth to say, are you willing to die for Andrew Yang? I mean, it is absurd on its face. Thankfully, the federal court recognized it as such. The Court of Appeals will do the same in due time. But again, don't take my word for it. Don't take Andrew Yang's word for it. Take Joe Biden's word for it, who 1 week before said, the greatest threat we have is that Trump will use COVID as false pretense, as an excuse to postpone or cancel the general election. The New York State Democratic Party just gave him that excuse. And we said, fuck no.
Lutchi, I think we know where Herzog stands on this one. He doesn't seem too wishy-washy on his position. What about you? What's your take, bro?
Well, everything that Jonathan just said, spot on. So all I'm going to do is just add on to it. Basically, it's like this. This particular election is not just for presidential or congressional or state. It's also for district leaders. It's also for county committee. And if you really understand the infrastructure of how a party is made up down to the ED level, you'll understand that, for instance, county committee, they decide who the judges are. You know, you got district leaders who work in the Board of Elections and work with all the polling sites. So you have a plethora of candidates, including all the people who petitioned in January in order to become a delegate. You got them too. So it's more so about voter suppression, you know, because if you take Bernie Sanders and Andrew Yang off of the top of the ballot, they stand a better chance of surviving down ballot. Or at least the establishment stands a better chance of surviving down ballot because there won't be as much interest in the election. So if Bernie's on top of the ballot, they're going to lose a few congressional seats because more people more progressives are going to come out and vote. You know, so Jonathan's going to get more votes. I'm going to get more votes. Our opponents are going to get more votes. You know, so it's that deep. You know, it's really that deep. And this is why the fight is continuing, because if it was just simply to say, well, it's going to set a bad precedent. If it was just simply to set a bad precedent, what is the bad precedent? The bad precedent is to have to use a little more ink to put, you know, the presidential candidates on the ballot. That's not a very good argument. You know, so when we look deeper, and I'm pretty sure the judge looked deeper at it, and judges aren't stupid. They already saw, okay, well, they don't want Bernie on top of the ballot because they don't want as many people going out to vote. It's that simple, you know. And again, and it's to the point where the people instantly realized it. You know, like I've had friends calling me, do you know what just happened? I'm like, yeah, I just heard, man, they're trying to keep us from voting. You know, that's what I've heard, you know, so it's pretty sad to see it that way. And Jonathan, and it's so morbid to hear that they're saying, are you willing to die for Andrew Yang? That's insane just to hear. This is politics. I get it. But at the same time, if I recall correctly, after Donald Trump won the election, a very, very high level person in the Democrat Party told all young people to run. They told us all to run for office. That's what they told us to do. They said, run for office. So guess what? We ran for office. Now that we've run for office and we're on the ballot, they don't want people to vote for us. So it's going to be interesting to see where these appeals go. I would have to guess that it's going to end up going to the Supreme Court, because I doubt you're going to get another federal court to agree with the state of New York.
Yeah, this is historic times all around. And, you know, I, as a person who believes in democracy, I think the bar should be very high to do anything to reduce participation in any election. So I'm glad the case was won, and hopefully we can keep the fight going. Lutchi, before we say goodbye, I have very good news for you. My friend, sure. Laura Lane, who is one of the Nerds for Humanity members, also someone, CHJ Sen was saying, hey, who's going to match Tom's donation to Lutchi? And Laura Lane says she's going to do it. So Nerd
Laura,
God,
thank you so much.
we got to give her the, oh yeah,
yes.
Money in the bank.
Thank you, Laura.
Now make sure you spend it wisely, Lutchi. We're all giving money because we think that we believe in what you guys are doing and your candidacies, and we like you as people. So best of luck, sir, and hopefully we'll get you back in the Nerd Zone very shortly.
Thank you very much, Tom. And Jonathan, it's always a pleasure to see you, brother.
Good seeing you too, upside down.
See you later.
Right,
Goodbye,
you later,
nerds. Oh, Lutchi, you got to say goodbye, nerds, before we
Oh
boot you
yes,
from the room.
goodbye nerds. Absolutely, goodbye nerds. Goodbye,
There we go. Peace.
peace.
All right, Mr. Herzog. So because we can't have you left out of this fundraising challenge. Oh shit, are you guys on Wi-Fi? Whoops. I was just yelling at my sons, asking if they're using the Wi-Fi. Can you hear me now, Jonathan?
Yes, yeah.
All right. All right. So, because I don't want to, I want to be inclusive, and since you heard about our little fundraising challenge for Lutchi, we got to do one for Herzog. So right now on YouTube, we are at 34 likes. Okay, you and I are going to talk for about 45 minutes or so. And by the end of this stream, when we hit the 2-hour mark for the stream, by the way, do you have 45 minutes to talk, or you're okay? So what we'll do is we'll take the 30, whatever is the incremental likes above the 35. So if we have 50, then I'm happy to donate $15. If we have 85, I'll donate $50. Up to 50. Otherwise,
Let's get that 2,800 likes going.
No, I have to cap it. I have to cap it because Mrs. Nerds for Humanity was looking at my credit card bills, and there's a little bit of Act Blue action on there.
As it were.
She knows it's for a good cause, but she was like, "Hey, just make sure you kind of be responsible." So I'll do it for sure up to 50. And then we'll just check in. I'll let everybody know where we're at when we get close to the end, but it'll be 35. The total likes minus 35. I'll donate that with the up to 50. Now, Jonathan, let's get into this whole. Let's follow up a little more on this whole lawsuit thing. Like, who is behind this decision? You were saying like, hey, the big threat is Trump moves the general election. But I think Trumper for Yang raised a good point saying, hey, don't put this on Trump. This was the New York Board of Elections. Like, this is not some, Jared Kushner, Ivanka conspiracy. This is some other group. Who is the New York City Board of Elections? Who are these people that were advocating this position?
Yeah, so it's not that Trump did it. It's just that what Biden had suggested is that we don't want to set any precedent to allow our president to postpone or cancel the election. And it's just a state agency, right? So the governor of New York and now the attorney general of New York, Board of Elections commissioners, these are all these are agencies that are appointed by the state. And to Lucci's point, there's various levels on the state and city level where certain judicial and county committee and commissioner seats are appointed, certain ones are elected. But yeah, I mean, they administer elections in the state of New York.
What do you think is the motivation? It could be that they really think it is a public health argument. Like, I imagine if the presidential primary were on that ballot, that there might be some incremental people that will go to a polling station that otherwise would not have. And so you can make an argument that, well, by doing this, we're going to sort of reduce that incremental number who are voting in a presidential primary that may have already been decided. That's one.
Sure.
Motivation.
Well, you can extend that logic, Tom, to any race you'd like. You can say any race against any multi-decade powerful incumbent is essentially already decided. So why don't we just terminate those as well? Even the 4% of people who live in the 10th district, the 4% of people who lived or who voted in the 14th district in Alexandria's race in 2018 against Joe Crowley, who is going to be the next Speaker of the House, who outraced her 10-1, $3 million in corporate PAC and lobbyists money, and directly from the firms that these folks are supposed to be regulating. then why don't we terminate those races as well? Because they're essentially predetermined. No one had ever challenged Crowley in 20 years. No one has ever challenged Nadler essentially in 30 years after he was appointed to the seat when his predecessor died 3 days before the primary in 1992. The man was posthumously appointed to the seat by state party, Democratic Party bosses. They said, vote Ted even though he's dead in 1992, days before the primary, appointing their party chosen vessel in the form of Jerry Nadler, now the #2 House Democrat, the chair of the judiciary, the face of impeachment. And this is how politics is decided in the state of New York. So you can extend that logic to literally any single race, because there's two ways incumbents and politicians win in New York and maintain their power. The first is they make sure no one ever runs against them through many means. And the second is they make sure if and when someone has the audacity to run against them, that they split the challenger vote in all sorts of creative ways. Or even in this case, just cancel the election outright. So again, there is absolutely no boundary to that line of logic, because by definition, all these multi-decade incumbents who don't represent and are out of touch with their districts by generations, by decades. We're talking about a federal government, Tom, that still uses floppy disks, that the representatives sometimes don't even use email, less to say have apps on their phones. So this is the level that we're dealing with.
So let me just make sure I understand where you're going. Are you suggesting that interests that are aligned with Nadler are supportive of putting off this primary because they don't want his seat challenged? Or are you just saying like the broader Democratic Party or the both parties don't like challengers in general and they like their favorites and they just all said in some smoky room, let's do everything we can to either split or suppress these upstarts?
It's not even a particularly smoky room. That's what's so fascinating about this process. If you look at the 80-page brief that we've been collecting evidence and gathering and going through, it literally says, if you look at the first page, it's like Andrew Yang on behalf of himself and all others. Jonathan Herzog, because we're part of a class action suit.
Mm-hmm.
Jonathan Herzog on behalf of himself and all other plaintiffs. Helen, so on and so forth for the dozens of delegates who are represented as co-plaintiffs on the suit. And then all the counterparties, all the parties being sued, the governor of New York, the New York Attorney General, the people's lawyer. I used to work for the senior advisor and counselor to the New York Attorney General. I was taught that we are the last line of defense. We are the people's lawyer. We represent the people who can't afford, perhaps, private access to attorneys. And so we need a public system to protect and defend the interests of the people. The Board of Elections Commissioners. So this is the entire New York State Democratic Party. And it's not some theory. This is just, again, openly documented empirical reality. And I can walk you through some of the particular case studies, just in my experience, that illustrate just that, where the ballot access process, I think, shows this most clearly. Did I lose you? Where'd nerds go?
I had to go to my auxiliary Wi-Fi. Are you there, Jonathan?
Yes, I just lost you for a second.
No, it turns out it was not the kids. It
Oh
was
no,
Mrs. Nerds was trying to
Mrs.
watch
Nerds.
her Netflix. And I was like, sister, you cannot be doing this during the movement. Like we're trying to defeat the entrenched incumbent conspiracy. So where I lost you, Jonathan, was, hey, if you read the briefs, you see all these like underdogs trying to get their voice heard, and then on the opposite side, and then that's when I lost you.
Gotcha. So not sure exactly where that was, but
I think
yes,
you were saying on the opposite side, the counterparties were blank, that kind of called out in the open who's
the
behind this.
governor of New York, the New York Attorney General, the Board of Elections Commissioners, the entire New York State Democratic Party. I mean, the chair of the party, Jay Jacobs, went on live TV and said just as much. So it's all public record. The PR, like again, there's no artifice to it. That's what's so incredible is they're so drunk on power, and they're so used to everyone just taking it sitting down. If you look at the response to this initially, 80% of it was like, it's just how it is. 10% was like, fuck you, and then there was us, and we're like, see you in court. So it's just again, it's power and politics at the most corrupt, disgusting levels.
Do you think they were surprised that you guys didn't back down? Because maybe they were, right? Like, who goes up against the governor, attorney general, the Democratic Party?
Yeah,
like, these are not small forces.
Yeah.
And you guys are, trying on shoestring budgets. Was there any conversation with them to try and sort it out before it got this far?
I mean, to your point, again, who has the hubris to challenge, decades of power? Again, if you look at like my seat in particular in the 10th district, the west side of Manhattan and South Brooklyn. So there were vacancy committees, this like little box on our petitions to get on the ballot, where you have to collect thousands of signatures in person. And ours happened to coincide exactly as COVID came online. Now, Andrew Yang was top of my vacancy committee, which technically means if I were to die, he would get the seat or be able to appoint my successor. But little did I know how much weight this carried, because for nearly a half century, Tom, the person who has represented the 10th district has been selected by the party bosses after the predecessor dies in office. That is just how power changes hands. An incumbent holds the seat for 2 to 3 decades. They die. They say, vote Ted, even though he's dead. Ted gets 80% of the vote. They appoint Nadler. Nadler holds the seat for 3 decades. No one challenges him because they know what will happen to them when they do. And then the cycle continues. If you look at Nadler's vacancy committee, it's the same cast of characters. The people who are in city council, the people who are in various appointed positions, some of the people who are thinking about or who are already running for mayor of New York. So it's the same cast of characters. Everyone knows, stay in line, wait your turn. You'll be called upon when we've decided that so. And to your point, and we've come across this even opening a bank account, a basic campaign's checkings account. Every single lawyer essentially in the city, every single for-profit investment bank or management firm, even consumer checkings account, it's all wrapped up together. And it's, again, this is not a conspiracy. It's just pure empirical fact. And I'm just laying out the fact patterns of the realities on the ground.
So I would not be surprised if there are conversations going on now where people in the party apparatus are saying, you know what, like this Herzog and Yang, like they're starting to cause trouble. And, like did that calculation come into your mind, which is like, hey, or when I win, I'm going to need to work with some of these folks that are
I'm
part
sorry,
of the
I
power
just lost
structure.
you when you said cause trouble.
Yeah, they're going to cause trouble. And had you considered the calculation of if you win or when you win, that you will need to work with some of these people in the power structure, and you don't want to be a rabble rouser because you're going to need to get stuff done. Like, how do you balance principles and, you know, what's right with playing the game to get things done for your constituents?
So the great thing, the blessing and the curse, the reality of, the position I'm in, which is like, they've, you can't buy me with anything, and they've tried to hire us. They've sent death threat. Like you just can't. Nothing will stick because like I just don't respond to that currency, and like the 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 more they throw at us, the more it just invigorates me and the team, because it just illustrates how weak they are. It just illustrates how weak they are because you have to imagine, and you can look at the FEC filings. It's all publicly available, recorded data. I mean, the tens of thousands of dollars spent on consulting and market research and the like, and Oppo research, they've literally got nothing. And so that's what's so fascinating, Tom, is, you know, I don't want a job from any of them, anywhere, in any place, anytime. And so, yeah, and I completely understand the constraints that people feel like they have one hand tied behind their back, like even Nadler, even Cuomo, even the attorney general, because again, it's like, well, if I go out of line, then like this person appointed me to this job, or this person made sure that I would win this select, like it's all, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. And then that's how the system continues because everyone feels like their hands are tied. But that's the magic of the Yang Gang. That's the magic of our movement, is that baked into the principles and the policies we're fighting for are like limitations of power because we recognize its corrupting effect. And so, for example, passing judicial and 18-year judicial and 12-year legislative term limits, I mean, and passing publicly financed elections and passing ranked choice voting and structuring in these ways so that people who are already in power have an incentive to do it, i.e. by being exempted, let's say, from that legislative term limit. It's like we're just in it to build the future, fix the system, clean up some of this mess that for whatever reason everyone feels like their hands are tied to, and then get out. So again, that's the blessing and the curse. That's the reality of it, where there's no downside, there's only upside, and it's tragic. But as Andrew said from the get-go, as he told Muhan, who told me in the earliest days, and we had him on Dialectics recently, he was the first hire for the Yang campaign. There's no one in the wings. There are no adults in the room. The reason Andrew Yang had to run for president and chose to and had the critical courage and leadership to is because he had met the senators, the politicians, the leaders, the presidents, the philanthropists, the social entrepreneurs, the people supposedly running the show. And he said, there are no adults in the room. There is no one in the wings. It's painful. It's tragic. It hurts. It's shocking. We're going to be constantly incredulous and seeking for some sort of savior, but the savior is only ourselves.
You know what? I was just watching a YouTube video where it was like some inspiration video where I think it was Seth Godin or something was giving someone else advice, and the guy was saying it was like the channel's called Behind the Brand, and he was saying, "Oh, Seth, I tried to get you on the show a lot of times, and you gave me some good advice, and it changed my life." And the advice was, no one is going to come and save you. There's no Prince Charming. There's no boat. Like, you need to take control and save yourself. And I thought that was like very profound. I was actually just telling one of my sons that the other day because he was very frustrated that, you know, he has too much homework and he feels like it's there and blah, 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 and all this stuff. And I was like, dude, no one's going to save you, man. There's no rescue party that's going to do this homework for you. Let me ask you this, Jonathan, as a hypothetical. Let's say you were getting ready to push we turn back time and you hear about this decision to try and delay or postpone or whatever. And you're like, hey, that's not cool. I'm not standing up for this. And someone gives you a call, someone of great influence within the current power structure. And they say, you know, Jonathan, you are a really bright guy. We see a lot of potential in you. And you're young, you know, you're 25. Here's what's going to happen. You're not going to participate in this lawsuit. You're a smart guy. We're going to remember this, and maybe you could be on the staff of the Nadler team. You know, maybe when the next election comes around, we're going to, you know, strongly consider you as part of the team. Why would you throw that away? Like, how would you think about that sort of like chess game that might have been, you know, if it were ever presented? Like, how would you think about that?
So I'll say two things. One is this isn't hypothetical. I've had a number of conversations like this, but it's very simple. It's really quite simple. You look at Joe Biden's announcements of who's going to lead and co-chair and be on his committees for policy. Did you see anywhere on that list anything related to the Yang Gang, to Andrew Yang, to UBI? No, absolutely not. And so lest we had any kernel of doubt, any naivete that we'll win in the marketplace of ideas, they'll see the reason, they'll see the light, they'll come to our side and fight for what's right, and a vision that includes themselves, their families, and others, the answer is no, they won't. It's sad, it sucks, because it's like, all right, fine, we'll have to win. Like, all right, fine. You know, it's like, we'll have to take over the presidency, we'll have to take over the House. Like, all right, if you insist, you know?
Yeah, like you brought up Biden, who I think a lot of people respect in terms of his character and, you know, his decades of service. But I also agree, like, even in this kind of crazy pandemic world with basic income really becoming more of a mainstream accepted kind of topic for discussion, I haven't seen much in terms of even like discussion of pilots or feedback on like the current stimulus plans. Like, what do you think is the calculation there, that they just think it's too?
I lost you there.
So with Biden, what do you think is the calculation? Because I haven't seen him do much around pro UBI.
Not just not pro UBI, Tom. We're talking about like repudiation, like full on like rejection of it. Again, look at that list of like who's on the Economic Policy Committee, and it's a full on repudiation and fuck you to us. And so I don't even care. I don't care what the reason is. They don't get it. They don't buy it. They don't believe it. They think it won't sell. They're opposed. Their incentives. I don't care. I just know that this is empirical, hard, undeniable fact. And so what's the alternative? How do we move forward? We take the reins back from them. And so to your point, you know, so one of the main action items from all of this, from all that's transpired over the past 2 weeks, is calling upon all of us in the Yang Gang to help push and force the first series of televised debates in our district's history. And so we're partnering hopefully with you and with Paget and James Treacle and Heidi and Humanity for Yang and everyone, because we want to get 25,000 people to trend. And this is open for discussion and debate and best practices from the people who are pros at this. But the tentative trend is hashtag Herzog Nadler debates. And to your point about being 25, I'm turning 25 on May 25th on Memorial Day on Monday. And there would be no greater, birthday gift. And really just for us, and to your point about the democratic process and constitutional rights, and the Yang Gang winning and getting the biggest bully pulpit in the halls of Congress, then forcing the first series of televised debates against Jerry Nadler. If you look at what the Yang Gang accomplished, getting Nancy Pelosi on record on UBI, and we didn't even have a dog in that fight at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we have a dog in this fight. We have more leverage, and we haven't gotten her number two to say anything about UBI. You know, he hasn't even looked or taken any stance on the $2,000 a month bill that's sitting in Congress for immediate direct cash relief. So this is, I think, the most actionable path forward in this context, because when we force this series of debates, the first televised debates in the history of the district, we will win. Because just like any house of cards, that house of cards being the institutions and systems that Andrew and we've been calling out from the get-go, the house of cards, I think it was put best to me, I think Padgett said this, oh, that would be like Bloomberg on the debate stage. And I'm like, exactly. Throw infinite capital at something, right? Someone who's had like a moat protecting them for their entire career, and then watch that house of cards tumble when it gets tapped. And so that's the thing. Again, we're talking about a 30-year challenger who's never, a 30-year incumbent who was appointed to the seat and has never faced a challenger. So if and when we force that debate, he will lose. And the Yang Gang will get the biggest bully pulpit, the loudest, most powerful voice for universal basic income right here from the heart of New York City in the federal halls of Congress.
So what do you think? Why do you think Nadler tag trending?
What's that?
I don't know. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Why do you think Nadler would agree to debate you, even if we got the hashtag trending? He might say, you kids doing your fun Twitter thing, like, I'll just kind of ignore you and you'll go away because I'm the incumbent.
Because they've never faced a true grassroots campaign. And again, there's no theory to anything I'm saying. There's like hard empirical data and fact, and just looking back at recent history. Why the fuck would Nancy Pelosi come out and say anything, less to say anything positive about universal basic income? Because 35,000 people directly targeted her on Twitter. And, again, it's like this particular echelon, this particular group of people, of the press and the staffers and the particular elite who exist and live and breathe Twitter, and take that as the truth about the base, about the Democratic Party, and about where the people are. And again, this is just empirical fact. Why is Tim Ryan now Yang Gang? Why did dozens of representatives sign on to this bill? Like, it didn't just happen. Nothing just happens. There's no inevitability. There's no teleology. There's no natural order. It's because someone held their feet to the fire. And we got Nancy Pelosi on record. I mean, that's insane. And we didn't even have a dog in that fight. We didn't even have, at that time, a universal basic income challenger to her. So he will, because he will have to. Because if we can get 35,000 people to say, hey, Nadler, what you scared of? Like, come out wherever you are, then he'll be forced to. Because again, there's a particular type of person, the kind of like Politico Hill staffer journalist type who like takes Twitter as like the truth about where people are and what people believe. And they only respond to a couple of things. One of those is money. And another of those is Twitter. And especially in a world of COVID, where all campaigning is digital, every single piece of information anyone is getting about their candidates and who they're choosing to represent them is coming from the internet. So again, there's no conjecture, there's no theory to it. It's just the hard empirical reality of what these people respond to.
So when is this? When are we going to do this? On May 25th? Is that the plan?
So that's what we were thinking. James Ellers and Heidi suggested we kind of do it as like a weekend adventure. So starting on Friday, like before Memorial Day. And they were thinking of wrapping it in more like Yang Gang hashtag democracy language, and not using like directly the sort of like Herzog Nadler debates, but like the point is like the end goal being forcing for the first time this series of televised debates. However we get there, brighter minds than mine, people who've been leading this fight for weeks now, even and especially after Andrew left the race. So it's within the next like 5 to 7 days, if we can and when we can galvanize this effort around this, I think this is the most feasible and impactful thing we can do to not just abolish gross poverty, but really bring the vision and the values and the policies we've been fighting for years now to the table. And as someone said in the feed, and it's true, and I keep saying this, Nancy Pelosi herself once said, "Power is never given; it's always taken." It's time for us to take it.
I'm going to defer to Paget and Company on all of the hashtag strategy. That is actually not my area of expertise, but I will for sure participate with whatever you guys come up with. And I'm thinking maybe I might even do like a Nerds for Humanity style, like I might show some charts and stuff about your race. So I might hit you up, your team up for some data and stuff like that. But
totally, we have this like very pretty comprehensive doc that we've kind of been sharing. So I can, if I get your email, I can just shoot it off to you. You'll see there's like there's all sorts of data and citations in it.
Oh, dude, that's like catnip for me. I love it. All right, so I'll definitely put together a video and publish it whenever the party begins for that movement. Has been I think he perked up a bit when he heard you say like, hey, Biden's like not just not talking about UBI, he's kind of dismissing it, or by virtue of the people that he's surrounding himself with is not really part of that movement. So I guess the question is like, so who are you supporting for president, given that Biden is so resistant to the notion of basic income?
Yeah, well, so right now, Tom, I'm still fighting for the chance to even express my vote and express my preference, because right now my ballot does not have any presidential candidates on it at all. So I actually can't vote for for anyone at this point.
Oh, that is ironic. Yes, I like the way you handled that. Yeah, you don't really.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, who I'd want to vote for and who I'd plan to vote for, and as a delegate for Andrew Yang, like literally my name would also be under his, as well as all these other delegates. Like we all collected over nearly 40,000 signatures across the state in the dead of winter on our own as volunteers to get him on the ballot. So it's very real and very personal, because I 100% planned on April 28th to cast the vote for Andrew Yang, regardless of the condition of the race, and for myself as his delegate.
Yeah, you have that right. I mean, I actually feel similarly in that I voted in the Democrats abroad primary after Yang suspended, but I felt like that's my right, gosh darn it, and I'm going to vote for him. And I was one of like 85 people in the Democrats abroad primary that voted for Yang, but I felt like it was very, I don't know, it was a profound moment for me. I was like, yeah, we've talked about this. And that's part of what democracy is all about. It can't just be you only get to vote for the one who wins, right?
Well, because like in theory, in principle, the one who wins is the one who the most people vote for.
Indeed, yes, it's a little circular that way. I feel you. Oh, a question from Nell. Hey, just to be clear, I'm going to do whatever the hashtag the sort of the brain trust comes up with. I'm just saying I don't have an opinion on whether it should be Herzog debates Nadler or some more kind of generic Yang Gang debate, like whatever. Like I'm just saying like I'm not good at picking hashtags, so I'll just follow whatever Paget and the rest of them come up with. They know that stuff way better than I do. Asked he asked this earlier to Lutchi. Very important question.
Yankees.
Mets. Yeah, I figured. Upper West Side, there's I respect that you didn't try and thread the
No,
needle.
I'm not gonna do the like one side of the hat and then the other and flip it. No, sorry. I'll like save that for Kate McKinnon on SNL.
I mean, I'm not big into baseball, but I'm kind of let
Me
me try.
neither, but if I had to choose.
Yeah, well, let me try and make an argument there, which is that, I think the reputation of the Yankees is that they kind of, have this unfair financial advantage over other teams. And they're just kind of, it doesn't feel very like a level playing field. And in a way, the analogies like Yankees, Nadler, like it's the old money, it's the old power base, but you just like the Yankees, I guess, because you don't have an opinion on the fact that they just buy up all talent and make it unfair.
I honestly do not know literally a single thing about baseball. I just know that I heard the word Yankees more as a child. That's literally it. And that's like a bullshit reason. And probably this is why, all sorts of things happen. It's just name recognition, right?
It's the tribe, man. Yeah, everything's tribal. Although I will say, one of the things that I love about, I know this is turning into like a random sports conversation, but just briefly, the NFL, their approach is like every team has the same amount of money for their players. And that's why, like the Seahawks can, challenge the New York Giants or. I mean, do you have an opinion? Like sometimes Congress does talk about professional sports and things like that. Are there any things in that realm that you think are like, let's say, National Football League, like health issues? Do you have an opinion on that stuff, or is it more obviously you're focused on probably bigger problems?
Yeah, so I'll be honest, I don't know much about sports. I grew up swimming, and yeah, I don't know much about sports. I know I'm supposed to, I think in the context of the Yang Gang, say like Buffalo Bills, but like I don't think I've ever watched, like shoot me, but I've never watched a full football game.
Oh, you know what? I hadn't either until like 10 years ago. And I was born in the States, but just never really clicked with me. I will say more and way more complex than it appears. But we'll save that for a future live stream. So, Jonathan, I think we're running up on time. Let me just check on how many likes we have for our little fundraising competition. So I think right now we're up to, oh no, we're only at 39 likes, which means that, 46. We're at 46, so it's 11 more than when we started. I'm obviously going to have a minimum of 20. But guys, if you want to like this stream and help out Jonathan, basically every time you hit that like, it's like giving $1 to the campaign and I'm paying for it. So it's a no-brainer. We'll keep the lines open for another 6 minutes and a half before we make our live stream donation to the Herzog. So let me ask you this, Jonathan. We have some questions for you. People want to get to know you. Favorite food?
Ooh, okay. So there's this. Okay, well, this is not food, but there's a Cinnabon on like 43rd Street. And okay. So I lived like right around there in like Hell's Kitchen, and so there's a Cinnabon there in 43rd Street, and then I would do this like route from Cinnabon to Panda Express on 46. Again, not food, but like this was like when we would spend like 16 hours a day like out in the streets like gathering signatures. Just like going, in front of like 15,000 people and like the kind of like physical manual labor, I'm like, all I need is a Cinnabon and some Panda.
Now with the Panda, I'm guessing if you like Cinnabon there at the Panda.
What's that?
What are you ordering at the Panda?
Oh, I mean, come on, let's
Panda
be real.
Express.
Like, look at me. Like, I get the orange chicken, and then
I knew it.
then I get the white rice, and then that's it. And then like always, you like walk in, they're like, "Welcome to Panda," and they're like, "Do you want to try something?" And I'm like, I know what I'm getting,
No.
but like I wanted orange, so like I'll go for it. But yeah, I mean, like you always walk in, and I'm like, maybe I'll get something new today, like a vegetable. But no, it's orange chicken, it's white rice. It's the same thing every time. Are they closed for COVID? Yes. Am I devastated? Yes.
Well, you know what? A lot of people give people crap for Panda because it's not the most authentic kind of Chinese cuisine that you can find on the planet. It is quite tasty. I feel you, and then especially with the Cinnabon, it makes perfect sense that you would like the orange chicken. Like you like the sweeter side, and get you some more sugar after volunteering 24 hours a day. Favorite pizza?
Ooh, wow. Now you are so smart. Coronet is like a fascinating. So if you don't know anything about Coronet pizza, it's by Columbia. It's in the district because it's the entire west side of Manhattan. It's the biggest pizza you'll ever see. It's basically the size of like your torso. I would not say it's the best pizza. It's like the most interesting pizza. The best pizza is Familia's Pizza on 96th Street, but you got to go to the East Side version because I went to school at Hunter on the East Side, and so you get the Familia's Pizza. It's delicious. It's great.
I used to live on the Upper West Side.
What's that? I keep losing
And
you.
to live on the Upper West Side. Oh,
Yes.
Can you hear me now? Hello? My brother used to live on the Upper West Side. And whenever I visited him, he and I would go to, I think they closed now, but there was an H&H Bagel around there. Oh, and you would get it, and you wouldn't have to toast it. It was so hot. Yeah. It was right out of the oven. Oh, so good. So good. Okay, here's a question from Lemon and Lime. How old were you when you first got interested in politics?
It's a really good question. I think my like political awakening, like I would have considered myself fairly politically homeless. I was very much into the kind of tribe of reason online and like, you know, all these different thinkers and kind of created this like pseudo side curriculum for myself. But I think truthfully and honestly, it was Yang who woke me up and said, actually, like these things you care about, these ideas you care about, they can actually be politics, because politics was always this like gross thing that didn't involve me and like certainly wasn't something I could do, right? You know, being the son of immigrants, it's like it's not something around, as Andrew said, it's not something you like discuss around the dinner table. But it was really Andrew, again, just like a guy saying there's no one in the wings, we actually can and must build a better alternative, that I was like, oh, okay, I guess like we should do the same. So it was like, yeah, he was kind of my political awakening.
The dinner table, what do your parents think of what you're doing? Because I could imagine if I were having a conversation with Mama Nerds for Humanity, she would, and I were in your shoes, she would say, wait, hold on. You have a degree from Harvard Law, you have an MBA, like you could become a partner at Cravath, or you could be a partner at McKinsey, and you could have a house on the Hamptons, and what are you doing running for office? What do your parents say about what you're doing?
So I think Andrew put this back because he's just so fucking hilarious, and I wish I had like half the wit he has. I think he was on Bill Maher, and he was like, Bill, there were some people in the early days of my race who said that an Asian guy couldn't become president. And then like Bill like chuckles or whatever. And he's like, those people were my parents. And like I think that just like captured it very well in like as best a way as like, Yang could. In that, yeah, I mean it's challenging in many respects, but it's like you just gain more validation and sort of vindication as time goes on. Like I remember again, like fall of 2018, the Yang campaign, we were bankrupt. There were 6 of us. We had no polls, no money, no press, nothing. And we all come together in the midst of this. Carly and I are sitting together in Iowa. I'm like, Carly, this is our base, the tribe of reason. We need to, like, literally, Sam and Eric had said on air, there's tens of thousands of people waiting in the wings who want a political leader, a political movement to turn their ideas into action. How is it that these things are existing in silos? She's like, Jonathan, calm down. Let's sit through, watch these videos that you've seen. We watch them together on 2x speed. We timestamp them. We cut them. We hyperlink them. We put together this whole pitch. We get in a call with Zach and Andrew and the rest of the team, and we say, Andrew, you are going to write a pitch to your friends Sam and Eric to activate the tribe of reason. If their words are not hollow, if their words have not been bullshit, they will see that this is the way forward. 3 hours later, this is middle of December 2018, we get a response back. Andrew, got you on Rogan. And so to what the rest of the world seemed to be this bankrupt, know-nothing, floundering campaign, we had planted that seed so that 2 months later, we would have the big reveal. And then day after day after day, right after, we got that 65,000th individual contribution by middle of March, being one of the first top 5 or 7 candidates to even qualify for the first debate in the biggest field in American Democratic presidential history, getting this no-name random guy, the first non-billionaire, the first non-politician since Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson to ever even make the stage, less to say be a top 6 contender come the Iowa caucus. So at every stage, everyone said this is impossible. And then the impossible became the inevitable when suddenly in coronavirus, we started sending out cash directly to millions of Americans.
Yeah, you're totally right, man. I mean, I buy it. I'm glad. Oh no, you see back?
Yes, just dismiss that.
I was just saying, I'm glad you didn't listen to the naysayers that just wanted you to work at Simpson Thatcher or whatever and get a real job. Good for you, my friend. Elizabeth wants to know your favorite Netflix show. Are you getting any Netflix time in there?
Now, no, but there was so much before. Oh, I'm obsessed with Nikki Glaser, Ali Wong, just fun, raunchy, smart comics. So love them, love their content.
Since your family came from Israel, I have to tell you guys, one of my favorite Netflix series is called Fauda.
Fauda, yeah.
Yeah. Whoa. If you guys have not seen it, F-A. If you like Homeland, that kind of thing, or 24, it makes that look like shit. Like Fauda's legit. Okay, moving on. Someone was asking about your favorite book. You seem like a well-read gentleman. What do you like to read?
Oh gosh, well it's been a while, to be honest, for any sort of content media or reading for that matter. One book that comes to mind, this was a pretty off the beaten path, just a very, very small sort of policy-oriented read, was called Catching Up or Leading the Way by Yang Zhao. It was a comparative look at the Chinese and American education systems. I don't know why that comes to mind. It wasn't even particularly a recent read. I just what's that?
What was one of the things that was thought-provoking about that book? Was there something that you still were like, wow, that's interesting, I didn't think about it that way?
It actually kind of came to the fore in my conversation with Muhan recently, because his story and his perspective, because we had like always wrestled with like, why do you see this? Why do you get it? And like, and he had shared how his mom kind of immigrated after the Cultural Revolution in China, and how that informed his perspective growing up in Boston, and this kind of shared sense of outsiderness, but also like we kind of reached this point in our conversation where I was like, okay, Muhan, like, great, I get it. This like history of the story makes sense. I see some resonance and parallels with my own. But like, why is your answer not then to follow the party line and say, well, all we need is more, scholarships and fellowships so that some homeless can go to Harvard, essentially. And he's like, because I have this thing called enlightened self-interest. And he's like, because the history and the reality of oppressive authoritarian regimes, and because the history and stark reality of education in that context, that cultural revolution being so salient and top of mind to him, he's like, again, it's just a matter of enlightened self-interest. Like, how do you preserve our way of life? And this is particularly true in the time of COVID, where, again, the United States, by some accords, is considered a failed state. And if you look at our response and the infection rates and the fatality rates and the inability to contact trace and have wide-scale testing, we have to offer a robust, meaningful, compelling alternative to the authoritarian digital surveillance state that increasingly countries like China are offering. And so we have to offer an alternative that can somehow maintain liberal democracy, somehow maintain civil liberties, but also, do the work of protecting, safeguarding our people. And so I think the cross-cultural comparison and being able to look beyond ourselves, beyond this very hyper American-centric view that we have, was very powerful, especially in this moment.
Cool. Now, a purely a very American issue is gun control, or guns.
Yes, and then I think
general.
I might have to run after this.
All right, this will be the final question. What is your take on it? Control other that's needed. What's your take on gun control? You live in New York. You probably want more of it. There's people in other parts of the country that don't think it's required.
Yeah, so frankly, I see it as a gun safety and public health issue. I think one of the shocking, stark statistics that came out in the context of this pandemic is we haven't seen a mass shooting like on a, for instance, school ground in recent weeks, in part because of the shutdown. And that just illustrates how desensitized we've become. And we don't have to accept that new normal. And so I think increasing and enhancing gun safety is critical and essential. And again, in part, it goes, as Andrew's walked us through the kind of root cause analysis of so many of these pathways, both in the context of campaign finance reform and the stranglehold of organizations like the NRA on our legislature and on federal lawmaking, but also on the kind of upstream causes of violence, of radicalization, of a sense of malaise and disconnect and disbelief with the system. I mean, the most stark of those being because one of the most common sources of gun violence is suicide and is self-harm. And we know that American life expectancy had declined for 3 years before the pandemic, before Trump, before any of this. And I think that I see it through the lens of gun safety and public health. But again, all the while maintaining fundamental liberties and freedom and self-protection.
All right. And I know you got to go. I just checked. We were at 17 incremental likes since we started. So as promised, let's just do this real quick. We're going to go to herzog2020.com. We're going to fire up look at this beautiful man here on the donation page. So I'm going to round it up to 20. So everybody give me 3 more likes so that you can make me an honest man. And then I'm not going to leave a tip. Says hang on. We're going to make it one time for now. There you go. And then we'll also share it on Twitter. So with that, thank you, Jonathan, for spending time with us back in the Nerd Zone again. It's always a pleasure to have you here. We can't wait to have you back in the future. Give them hell, and let's get that debate between you and Nadler. I would pay money to see that.
So appreciate it. Love you, brother. It turns out there's some things money can't buy. People, passion, and a vision to boot. Let's win.
Nerd gong for that. Goodbye, nerds.
Goodbye, nerds. I love you, nerds.